In Quran 1886, it indicates that the sun has a physical place from where it sets from, where it says, until when he reached the setting of the sun, he found it setting in a body of dark water, and he found near it people. We said, O Dhul Qarnayn, either you punish or else adopt among them goodness. The Arabic term Maghrib, setting, circled in red, is a term which is in the ablative form to denote a place. It can also be used in an adverbial sense as the time in which the action takes place, meaning, in this case, the time of the sun setting, which is why the term can also mean the west, as in the geographical direction setting of the sun as seen from Earth. Astronomically speaking, in reality, of course, the sun does not rise or set. By saying Maghrib, what the Quran could be describing here is the literal and the physical rising of the sun from the earth, as the verse goes on to qualify the ablative by using the verb taghrubu, setting, circled in blue, which itself is a derivative of Maghrib, but this time expressed in the present tense form. In a few verses, the Quran seems to corroborate the idea that the sun has a physical place from where it rises and sets from, because it says in Quran 1890, until when he came to the rising of the sun, he, Dhul Qarnayn, found it rising on a people for whom we had not made against it, the sun, any shield. The term matli'a, circled in red, is an Arabic term which is again in the ablative form to denote a place. Again, it can also be used in an adverbial sense as the time in which a certain action takes place, meaning, in this case, the time of the sun rising up. But what it does not mean here is the east, as in the geographical direction rising of the sun, in Arabic mashriq, as seen from earth, because that phrase has not been used in that way here as it is used elsewhere in the Quran, for example in Quran 2:258 to describe where the sun rises. At any rate, by saying matli'a, what the Quran seems to be describing is a literal and physical rising of the sun from the earth, because the verse goes on to qualify this by using the same verb tatlu'u, rising, circled in blue, which itself is a derivative of matli'a, but expressed in the present tense. Another indicator that it means the literal rising place of the sun is that the verse goes on to say, on a people for whom we had not made against it, the sun, any shield. If it is explained as there were no trees or mountains or houses, then this can apply for any desert, any barren land on earth. So by mentioning the need for a shield against the sun only goes on to strengthen the literal understanding of the verse. For example, well-known classical commentators of Tafsir al-Jalalain explained the sun literally rose above a group of people, and due to its physical proximity, it had darkened them. This is where black people get their color. They would build underground tunnels to escape the heat of the sun when it was rising over them. The meaning of the physical rising and setting of the sun in the Quran can be evidenced from another clue, in that Dhul Qarnayn, commonly thought to be Alexander the Great, found the sun rising. But this is explained away by apologists to mean Dhul Qarnayn did not find the sun physically rising from the earth, but only that he perceived or thought he had found the place from where the sun rose from. The verb that will be focused upon in the Arabic is wajada, which is commonly used to mean found in the literal sense when it is followed by a physical object. Here, the physical object is the sun. If the words perceived, appeared, or thought were meant, then these other verbs could have been used in the Quran as their derivative verb forms are found elsewhere in the Quran. In other words, Allah could have used these other words and been more precise rather than leave the verse ambiguous and open to interpretation or confusion. Here is a popular online dictionary called Al-Mani. As can be seen, the common dictionary definition of wajada means found, although in certain situations it can mean perceived, appeared or thought. These situations will be explained next. For example, if the verb wajada is followed by a physical object, then it has to be translated in the literal sense. If anything, the sentence structure in the Quran gives the impression the verb found, wajada, is in the literal sense, not the other explanations given by apologists. For example, if in Arabic someone uses the verb wajada, found, and says wajada waladu kitaban, it means the boy found a book. It does not mean a boy perceived a book. This is because the book is a physical object. On the other hand, if the verb wajada is followed by an intangible, descriptive object, then it could also mean perceived. For example, wajada waladu rahiyatul itri qawiya. A boy found the smell of the fragrance strong. Implicitly, this sentence could also mean the boy felt or perceived it to be strong. In other words, this is similar to the English language. If the verb found is followed by something inanimate, intangible, an abstract thought or concept, then found could also mean perceived or thought. For example, if someone says, the boy found the exam difficult, in Arabic the sentence would be وجد الولد الامتحان صعبا. This sentence could also mean the boy thought the exam was difficult. So the verb found or wajada could also mean perceived here, as it is from the boy's perspective that the exam was difficult, because another boy could have found it easy. But in the Quran, the sun is a physical object, and the verb wajada that comes before it will have to be translated as literally found according to the rules of grammar, sentence structure, and the context of the verse. For example, what was meant by the context of the verse is, consider Quran 18:86. Until when he reached the setting of the sun, he found it setting in a spring of dark mud, and he found near it a people. Allah said, O Dhul Qarnayn, either you punish them, or else adopt among them a way of goodness. This verse gives another clue about the word wajada and whether it is meant in the literal sense. This is because wajada, found, is mentioned twice in the same verse. If the first wajada is translated as perceived or appeared, then why is the second wajada, found, in the same verse is translated as found in the literal sense when it came to the people he, Dhul Qarnayn, found near the sunset? It is because there is the recognition that it would be absurd to suggest the second wajada in green to mean the people who perceived or appeared to him. Also, the people he found are a physical entity just like the sun, not an abstract object. Another verb that can be analysed to ascertain if Dhul Qarnayn physically reached the sun's rising or setting place, or if it was just a metaphor, can be deduced from Quran verse 1886 and 1890, where it mentions the verb balagha circled in red. It means he reached. In verse 86, it translates as he reached the sun's setting place. In verse 90, he reached the sun's rising place. Apologists argue that it means that Dhul Qarnayn reached the time of when the sun was setting or rising, respectively, not the physical place of the sun rising or setting was reached by him. Proof that the verse, when using balagha, means reaching the place, not the time, can be seen in a few verses' time. In Quran 18:93, where it says, until he reached balagha, a pass between the two mountains, he found wajada, in front of them a people who could hardly understand his language. So here the term balagha is repeated, and it is in reference to a physical place, a place between the two mountains. To say he reached the time between the two mountains makes no sense. Again, the verb wajada is repeated to mean found in the physical sense, because he found a people. It does not mean he perceived a people who could not understand his language. So in conclusion, the Quran seems to be reinforcing the general incorrect view at the time of the people within Arabia who were without knowledge of the earth's rotation around the sun. To them it seemed like the sun rose and set from a certain place on earth every day, as seen in the last video. This is why the Quran indicates the sun has a set place from where it rises from and where it sets from. The grammar of the sentence structures, as well as its context in relation to other verses, indicate what is expressed is the literal place of the rising and setting of the sun, which Zulkarnain found, reached, and saw. In the next video, evidence will be provided from early Muslim scholars, commentaries, and hadiths, sayings of Muhammad, to find out whether these verses are literal or metaphorical. The point remains, why would Allah reveal the verses in such a way that the plain reading depicts a 7th century inaccurate view of the universe? And why do the verses give the impression that it is to be read literally? Why is there the need to jump through hoops when interpreted in any other way? How can this be the style of God's perfect word?